asked myself, how will my two daughters use this technology when they grow up? And it was super clear to me that it's going to be woven into everything that they use. It's not even going to be called AI in 10, 18 years. And it's just going to be called text generation or image generation, kind of how today nobody really knows how Wi-Fi works, but we all know we need Wi-Fi everywhere. The first one I'm going to show you is our newsletter generator.
Alex, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Super excited to do this. So you're living AI stuff all day, every day, been doing it for a while. I'd love for you to just go through a little bit of your background and what kind of stuff you're working on today.
I've had a lot of different careers. I started as an SAP business analyst. Wasn't really a good fit for me. I was working at an oil and gas company. Then I switched to the creative industry. I became a producer for advertising agencies and I freelanced a lot. I did that for several years and I ended up getting recruited by Google for a very small R&D team that needed help with creative production. I ended up staying there for 7 years, became a product manager there, got my initial chops of understanding how machine learning works. Our team was really focused on applying machine learning to sensor signals to be able to better understand human intent. So doing things like presence detection or gesture detection and even respiration detection. That was where I learned how to take a technology from 0 to 1, better understand user needs, and really go through that product development lifecycle. And when OpenAI first released ChatGPT, funny enough, I kind of signed it off because I didn't really, after working with the assistant team, I saw how brute force the old way of natural language processing was. And, it wasn't until I dove into the actual technology of transformers and understanding that there was an understanding of the relationship of language where I found that initial kind of kernel of truth and the hype that was happening at that moment. And so from that moment on, I got to a point where I asked myself, how will my two daughters use this technology when they grow up? And it was super clear to me that it's going to be woven into everything that they use. It's not even going to be called AI in 10, 18 years. My daughters are 3 and 4, and it's just going to be called text generation or image generation, kind of how today nobody really knows how Wi-Fi works, but we all know we need Wi-Fi everywhere. So I decided then and there that I want to be at the forefront of this technology. And I've been in AI consulting for the past year and a half, and I have joined the Cadre AI team as the head of their AI solutions to help businesses adopt AI. So we really focus on strategy and implementation, where we're able to help kind of upskill a business and their employees by taking them through the process of enabling them. And we do that specifically by doing their AI strategy, their AI policy for their employees, doing the employee training, but then working in solutions as well, where the solutions can be anything from as simple as custom GPTs or gems or projects, whatever it would, or a Copilot agent, whatever your flavor is, and deploying them for specific departmental problems, or doing workflow automations, or building truly bespoke kind of RAG applications for the clients, depending on what their needs are. Yeah, so that's what we're focusing on today. And, it's a super exciting space. And I love the aha moments I see either from executives or even from kind of everyday kind of Joe from accounting when he first uses Copilot and he's like, wow, it just did that. So that's kind of what fuels me and what I'm really looking forward to doing more work in.
What's exciting about this for me is that you work with a lot of different companies. You actually work with the assistant team at Google. You have a really good perspective on what's working, what's not, what people want to do, and demos in real life. So it's not just shiny demos, it's actual applications of these things and what's working well and what isn't. So maybe we can dive right in. I know that you have prepared 2 or 3 different demos that we're going to walk through today. What is the first one that you are going to show us?
The first one I'm going to show you is our newsletter generator. So, the problem today is that newsletters are actually take up a lot of time for teams. Even one that's as simple as aggregating kind of the latest news about an industry and then kind of putting your own spin on it and then sourcing the images and then generating the final HTML. It takes a lot of time. And it's a process that if you have kind of just somebody on your team doing it, it can take 6 to 8 hours, right? And so one of the things that we built is our newsletter generator, where our goals here were to first and foremost aggregate all of your newsletters into one space so that you can have them in text format and accessible should you ever need to reference them, or you use that data to help inform how to kind of have future AI language models write better, but to also go through that writing process. And we always like to think of the process that a user takes to complete a task, right? So even in writing something, there's brainstorming, idea generation, there's an initial draft, editing, a second draft, proofreading, and then finally publishing, right? So that was kind of the approach we took here.
I think this is such a common use case for a lot of people. Most companies will have some form of a newsletter, or they should put one together. And newsletters are becoming so much more important in marketing because it's an own channel, right? If you have an email address, you can actually communicate with those users. And this is much better than if you have followers on X or even on YouTube. It's not quite the same because you can't communicate with the users all in the same way. But when you have email, it's a direct communication channel. But the other aspect is now you have to come up with stuff to communicate with them. And if it was easier for you to be able to communicate with your users and your subscribers, then a lot more people would do it. And I think what I'm excited about this is that once we show people that this is possible, a lot more folks might be able to communicate with their users and have newsletters in place. So excited to see what you're about to show us.
Yeah, for sure. So for us, I 100% agree with kind of your outline of the current state of things because this is a huge problem, but it's also a huge opportunity for businesses to be able to take advantage of it. And we've talked to a lot of business owners that are they're like, I'm not a marketing person. I don't have time for this, right? But if we deploy this for you, it's now you can generate these newsletters in maybe 30 minutes instead of spending 6 hours trying to think it all through on your own. So this user interface was really meant to kind of really simplify the process for writing a newsletter where you are aggregating different news about your industry but you also want to put your own spin on it. So very simple. It's just kind of what is the name of this newsletter? And typically it can be anything like 2025, 0331, and just this initial status of a draft. And then all you have to do is find your three news sources, drop them here into the URLs, but then also add your own context here. I'm a big fan of using transcription. And obviously fellow truly understands the power of transcription, and I encourage everyone that I ever kind of help them learn how to use AI is to use their own voice because you'll naturally give so much more context. So here is a place where you can add as much context as you want, and as the system goes through generating, it takes that into consideration. So once you drop your URLs and put the context in and click create, what it starts doing is going through each URL, pulling any relevant imagery. And so here, if you click on this, this is a generated image. If it can't find an image, we have it generating it in a brand style that matches your brand. It pulls out the title, the summary of that article, and it does it for the three articles that you upload. And then it has your first draft. And we developed this with kind of that process in mind, where we actually stop at the summaries first and foremost, where we informed our kind of users, you have to go and check those summaries and make sure that they're a good fit for your audience and your brand tone. We do our best to generate your brand tone as best as possible, but at the end of the day, we still need a human in the loop just to double check. And then once that is set, they can change the setting on it to start actually generating the draft. So this draft will generate an executive summary, all of the kind of summaries that you've written up, and also kind of any looking ahead. So you can customize this however you want. And your context is woven in throughout this. So these summaries are actually taking that into account. And so after that, when you're ready and you're happy with this draft, you are able to then generate HTML.
For anyone who is not watching video, this is super cool. So you enter three sources
Mhm.
where you want the news to pull from, and then it grabs those URLs, generates a summary, either grabs an image or generates an image automatically and then writes a draft of what you might want to say, depending
Exactly.
on whatever context you fed in. This is super useful. I mean, as you're going through this, the other thing that's going through my mind is I wonder if I can just, I mean, of course, we can send a newsletter to other people, but part of me is like, wow, this is a way better way for me to keep up to date with what's going on in, things that I care about. I can almost create myself like a custom newsletter that I can read that is
Mhm.
written just for me.
Yep.
So lots
100%.
of use cases for this.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, and then depending on how, because everybody deploys the final email differently, right? What we did here was actually take a branded template, and our final step here is actually generating the HTML for that full newsletter. So we take your branded template, and then we generate that final HTML, and then whatever your service or provider, whether it's HubSpot, MailSend, EasyMail, whatever, Mailchimp, you can just take this full HTML and just copy and paste it and drop it in there, and it's good to go. And I can show exactly kind of how that manifests itself. So what I've done is I've copied and pasted that HTML that was generated. This is just a simple HTML online viewer just to preview the text, but you can see on the right-hand side that it's all nicely formatted in our branded template. We have imagery coming in where this is an image that we pulled. This is another image that we pulled. These are the articles that we had talked about, right? Amazon introduced next generation with Alexa, and it's a fully baked HTML email ready to go newsletter, right? And so this process now goes from hours and hours down to the hardest part is curating the links, really, honestly. And so everything else is really streamlined, and you're able to push these out now, maybe going from like a quarterly newsletter to almost a weekly newsletter with a fraction of the effort.
The first thing that I think is I should forward this episode to every marketing person that I know because there's no excuse for not having a weekly newsletter. I mean,
Yeah.
you make it so much easier. It's kind of crazy not to have one. It's interesting. You were showing the HTML viewer. The other day, I found myself wanting to generate a QR code. And so, I went to Google and I was like QR code generator. And then there was all these websites and they all wanted me to create an account, just to generate a QR code. And I went to like 4 of them and all of them wanted me to generate an account. And I'm like very frustrated. Then I asked ChatGPT and it just generated me a QR code. So it made me think as you had your HTML viewer that like, I don't think you need to go to that. You probably can just get ChatGPT or Claude to just do it. Hey everyone, just a quick pause on today's episode to tell you about my day job. In addition to this new way, I'm the CEO of a company called Fellow.ai, and Fellow is an AI meeting assistant. It joins all your meetings, it summarizes them, tracks the actions and the decision, and does that better than any other tool that you've seen. We've spent a ton of time making sure that the meeting notes and summaries and action items that come out of Fellow are the most accurate, the most precise. It beats any human. You have to try it. But in addition to that, what makes Fellow different is that it is the first AI note taker built from the ground up with security and privacy in mind. This means that you can use it for all your meetings, not just the customer-facing ones, but also the sensitive ones, things like one-on-ones and executive team meetings and those QBRs and everything in between. It's got really good judgment. So, for example, if you start a meeting and you're talking about some social stuff that you don't really want on the record that's going to get emailed to everyone afterwards, Fellow just knows. It just doesn't include those things. Or say you have something that you talked about and later on you realize, oh man, that shouldn't have been there. Makes it really easy. You can go back to the meeting, select that part, delete it, and then it's gone from the record. It connects to all of the other tools you use in the organization, whether that's Slack or Asana or HubSpot or Salesforce or Linear or Jira or Confluence, whatever it is, Fellow integrates with all those things. I think the best part is that Fellow also acts as an AI chief of staff. Because it sits on all the meetings and the conversations that you have access to, you can ask it really cool questions such as, what are the biggest opportunities in my company? What are the bottlenecks in engineering? And Fellow just pieces together information, sees trends, and it can answer those sorts of questions. It can even do things like, hey, based on all of the one-on-ones that I've had with this particular person, can you create them a performance review? And it can do things like that too. And the sky's really the limit. What I really wanted you to do is have have the opportunity to try out Fellow, check it out, and we're making a special offer available to all our listeners. So just go to fellow.ai/thisnewway to try Fellow. There's a discount code in there for you if you decide to continue with it. Either way, I would love for you to try it and let me know what you think. And with that said, let's go back to the episode.
Yeah. No, because I made the original template in Claude, and then I went through a bunch of, I did a lot of MSO checks, or like email email deliverability and best practices codes through Claude. Yeah, but I could have probably dropped the code directly into Claude. Actually, no, you're absolutely right. So the best thing about this is that here we have our kind of user facing interface for really non-technical folks. But if you ever wanted to go into the data itself, you're able to go in and view data. This is an Airtable database where everything is just a row and a cell. So the great thing is your full draft is just in a single cell that you can expand and see everything here, as well as your HTML is a single cell with the full HTML code in Airtable. The real benefits about this is, and what everybody should be aware of, is that the real power with language models and AI is the data that you have. So now you have a central repository for all of your newsletters. You know all of the dates that they've been sent. You have all of that kind of historical knowledge and context in one place. And now if you were to take this Airtable and connect it with Claude through an MCP, you can now talk to your newsletters, right? Or you can generate new content based on that. Or you can do kind of take analytics and take your analytics of your best performing newsletters, go back to your data here and say, okay, this was one of our better performing newsletters. Can Claude now connect to it and take the analytics and the actual content and help me understand why was this more successful? Was it the subject line maybe? And do that type of deeper analysis.
Okay, so you have all of this stuff that at the same time is being posted to Airtable. What else are you using Airtable for? Like, what's the main rationale for getting these things into Airtable? Is it just being able to access through MCP later on, or what's your thinking on that?
So the initial thinking is to simplify the entire end-to-end process. Well, so behind the scenes, we have a full N8N workflow, kind of handling all of this work. And we could have probably done this in Google Sheets, and we explored that. But I really wanted to also have that user interface that you can build in Airtable. So you can have the interface plus the data and the backend. It really simplified the experience for kind of non-technical folks, where if you're trying to write a newsletter through the main, just like through a spreadsheet, it's a little bit clunky and not the best experience. The things here were helping with the automation workflows, working with Airtable is a little bit better. Having a repository of the data is always super helpful. And then the improved experience of the interface on the front end.
Awesome. I'd love to see how this stuff actually gets produced in N8N.
So in here, we've organized our workflow based on kind of those statuses that we talked about earlier. So the first workflow here is based on Airtable trigger, which is that button to submit. We take and crawl your URLs, and we basically parse them out and get the image URL, kind of break that up. And then we start drafting the summaries, and we start drafting the titles. And then we merge all that content and push it back into Airtable. And as I mentioned earlier, this is how we have that first human in the loop checkpoint. So you can review those summaries, review those article titles, and make sure that they are in line and they make sense. And in the summary draft here, we are actually taking the context. We're taking the original title from the article, and no, sorry. In here, in the summary or the AI steps, we're taking the content from the URL, and we're taking our context, and we are going through and running through this prompt to generate all that content. Next, after that, we have a draft generator where we take the three articles and we combine them into one draft. And then we have our HTML generator where it takes the template that we have for our base HTML, takes your draft, combines it. And then we also have our image generation steps in case this is our fallback, right? So if we can't pull an image from the original article, we generate one in the style of our brand. So this is our kind of backend N8N flow, where we're able to generate everything on the fly programmatically with this and determine or programmatically, but yet with the help of language models where needed. We're a little bit more probabilistic there, but we do our best to engineer the prompts to get them to where we want them to.
This is really great. So maybe one question I'll ask you is that do you do all of your kind of workflow building on N8N, or do you use some of the other workflow tools out there? And how do you decide which one to use for which task?
That's a really good question. And to be quite honest, I use the three big ones, I would say N8N, Zapier, and Make. So the way we decide on which ones to use is a little bit on client requirements and also on integration requirements. There are some clients and businesses out there that already have a Zapier account. And so that's kind of, and they want to continue that, right? So, okay, great. We'll work within those requirements and do our best to build out everything there. Sometimes there's a lot of integrations that just play nicer in a certain environment than another one. For example, one type of SaaS product can have a native integration in Zapier, but won't have one in N8N, right? And you can always build out the custom integration using their API endpoints, but sometimes it's just for the easier flow. You go kind of the path that's a little bit easier to get through. So it always depends, but I would say at the end of the day, they are becoming all relatively equal. I have been enjoying a lot of the make updates that they've done in the past couple of months, making the experience a little bit smoother. But N8N being able to self-host it is also another great capability where you can save yourself a lot of cost in running the automations. And so on the client side, we host our own N8N and we do a lot of our automations through there just because it's more cost effective when you have a variety of clients.
Do you find that is it larger organizations that host N8N themselves, or how often are you finding that people are actually hosting it? And are the cost savings mainly in subscription fees to N8N, or is it because you can use some of your own internal LLMs, or where does the cost savings come from most?
The cost savings is really on the number of active workflows that you can have. So when you have them hosted through N8N, there's a limitation of how many active workflows you can have running at one time. And you just need to pay more and more to have more and more run. In terms of language model costs, you always use an API key. So it's kind of, you're paying the same cost all the time, whether you self host it or it's going through N8N. Typically we do the hosting for our clients, so that at the end of the day we kind of own everything, manage everything. And there's really two types of clients. So there's a type of client that is like, you do everything for me or I do everything myself. Majority of the time a lot of our clients are just kind of like, do everything for me. We will have every now and again maybe 10-15% of our clients that are like, no, we want to bring everything in-house because we actually have the expertise to own it, right? It's all about finding the right owner and who's going to maintain that system, who you're going to rely upon when something breaks, right? Some sort of API gets updated, or on the front end, you start using a dash instead of a colon or something, and the automation breaks. Those are like little nuanced things, is where paying that service retainer is really helpful for a lot of businesses. And they just pay the retainer instead of bringing on a full-time headcount to oversee that.
And Alex, another question I have is, I mean, this is a really cool workflow. Really awesome to see how you've thought through it and brought together the entire automation inside of N8N. One question is around the sending of this stuff. What do you recommend once this is generated, the HTML is generated? How does the actual sending happen? And is there a tool that you recommend, or one that becomes a go-to that works well with N8N that you've been using more recently?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. In our experience, we found everybody kind of has their own email tool. It can be HubSpot, Mailchimp, EasyMail. For some of them, they have API integrations where we can programmatically pipe through HTML code, either fill in a template through an API call or just send the full HTML code. On this one, it's kind of if you already have a service that you're using, I try to meet you there and use that same service. If your service doesn't have those API calls, we just do the copy and paste either into the template or take that full HTML. I wouldn't say I'm the biggest expert in the mail world. So we personally use HubSpot. So we use that for a lot of our marketing. It works well for us. And because we also double as our CRM, but at the end of the day, I think you should find one that kind of meets your requirements. And there's a lot out there. I think EasyMail is one where it has a pretty generous free tier, just to get started when you're first building out your newsletter and you might be hesitant in making that investment, and having a free tier is really a great way to get your kind of your sea legs and getting the cadence. I think the hardest part about newsletters is having the muscle memory to keep doing it, and especially for a business, and having that owner and being able to continuously do that. I would say that's the hardest part. Figuring out the sending of the email is you figure it out once, and then you kind of have to incorporate that into your reps that you do to build that muscle memory.
Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the episode. One of the common things that we hear is, hey, you all talk about all these different tools, you walk through these demos. Sometimes it's hard for me to follow along. What we decided to do recently was take all the things that we talk about, put them in a weekly newsletter. We literally list all the tools, we link to them, and any demo that we walk through, we break it down step by step, put it in this newsletter so it's super easy for you to follow along. And the other nice thing is that if there's someone on your team that you think could benefit, they're working on that subject area, they could use a little bit of AI injection into their workflow, send them the newsletter, send them that particular episode. We make it super easy to do that. It's free to sign up. All you have to do is go to thisnewway.com, enter your email address, and you'll get this weekly email from us. Hope you enjoy it. With that said, let's go back to the episode. The other thing that comes to mind here is, you're building this obviously with N8N and Airtable. In theory, though, you could have vibe coded an entire application that does this, right? Newslettergenerator.com or whatever, right? That you could use just for yourself. You don't even have to offer it to other people. But when you think about putting these applications together, the vibe coding stuff, Cloud Code, all these tools are getting so good. Lovable, right? Bolt, all these guys are getting so good that sometimes it makes me think, do I really go build this in N8N and do all these workflows and all the troubleshooting and everything that comes with it? Or is it better just to build custom applications? Have you run into that sort of decision framework, and have you thought about that? And when do you decide which one to actually use?
That's a very good question. So I've used a lot of the vibe coders: Cursor, V0, Replit, and most recently Lovable. For something like this, I've never thought about it for workflow automation. So you bring up a really good point. And I think if I was to restart this project or how we built this, I may have, maybe ditched the Airtable completely and gotten a super base backend and built a custom front end for this, and kind of vibe coded all the API connections. That could have been a very worthwhile approach to investigate. And you can really kind of increase the bells and whistles on the custom interfaces that you can be and experience they can build out. Here, the focus was to really think it through step by step and have the touch points at every step. But I think you could vibe code those nowadays. They have gotten a lot better after using, most recently, I used Lovable, and I had a lot of success there, where in V0, Replit, I would always run into some sort of roadblock. And, as a product manager by heart, I love all these coders because I can finally build something on my own. But it's so frustrating when I get to a point where, like, okay, time to integrate the super base, and Replit just doesn't work. V0 just doesn't work. Lovable was the first one where I could actually integrate a super base backend, and was able to build the tables and map the data properly. And, the most recent one is I've been building a kind of a work stream generator, which was a really interesting experience to think through. Like, a lot of the projects that we do is like, how do we convey complexity and simplicity at the same time? So that's one that Lovable, I don't hit as many roadblocks. So that would be my biggest decision maker. If I was to do this again, I would go, and I always try all the different vibe coders. Like, I start with V0, Replit, Cursor, and now Lovable. I give them all the same prompt and I see where I get stuck. And I see what I like in terms of the design aesthetic that it builds for me. It's like a horse race. One will eventually fall off because it can't figure out the soup based integration. Another falls off because it can't figure out how to properly interface with Open API. That doesn't happen as much anymore, but in the beginning, it happened a lot. At the end of the day, I'm a big fan of prototyping. I think everybody should just go and vibe code everything, especially non-technical folks. I know in the tech world, a lot of people kind of look down on it, but I truly believe it's a great tool for people to express themselves.
There is this like natural competition between the workflow tools and the vibe coding tools, and as the vibe coding tools get better, I can see how there would be even more competition, because nothing beats describing something in natural language and getting the output versus connecting a bunch of things, and specifically has a little bit of learning ramp, right? It is harder to get started and to learn all the details. So super interesting to see. But ultimately, I mean, like you said, once you put these things up and you set them up, in theory, you just operate them. And so the hardest part is just investing the time to gain the efficiency. And then from then on, yes, you have a human in the loop, but in general, it's going to produce this outcome and you'll save hours a week and do the things that you would have never done. Because I think a lot of people just don't send newsletters because they just think that it takes a long time. So, Alex, this was great. I know you wanted to also just give us a little bit of a preview of maybe an MCP view that you've been using. And while you're pulling this up, maybe you can describe in your words, what is an MCP? How is it different than just, an API that might exist?
MCPs, their true value is that you are able to, if you're to look at a historical workflow automation that you build, you really have to think through step by step. What are the API calls that you do? What is the thinking that you have to apply to every step? What an MCP allows you to do is interface with multiple APIs on the fly. And this really simplifies the ability for you to go and into an external system and access the data in that system. The big question nowadays is, do I need to build out a full workflow automation step by step? Do I need to build a full RAG implementation where I have a whole vector database and now I have to maintain a vector database and a traditional database? Or do I take an MCP that's able to interface with my database, have CRUD updates, and be able to pull information just in time? So the MCP really allows you to go and get information just in time. And it comes with its own challenges there of pulling information on the fly, like latency, maybe not pulling the right information. And it's a way for a language model to be able to interface with other systems a little bit more naturally.
That makes a lot of sense. And nowadays, you can use these MCPs in a bunch of different places. I think we're going to go through Claude together. But of course, I've been seeing a lot of people internally here using MCPs inside a cursor, for example, and not just for accessing, say, Linear or Jira or something like that, but also other things. So, we're working with an internal MCP server, and hopefully eventually we make this public, but just, on fellow meetings and being able to access the content of your meetings directly from Cursor, for example, is just really cool. So I think the number of places that you can use MCP servers is increasing. So it's a thing that everybody listening in should pay attention to, because this is going to be a way of life. This doesn't seem like it's going away, and it's only getting bigger.
Yeah, 100%. And so what I'll walk through is what I consider like a super basic one. In Claude nowadays, you are able to set up in your connections with Drive, Gmail search, calendar search, and even Zapier. Zapier, you can add a bunch of different tools, ClickUp, Fireflies, Fellow. No, Fellow is not yet. You mentioned not quite yet. And so right now, oh, my calendar got disconnected. Well, anyways, I'll do a Drive search, right? So one of the best things about this is we have we are making Google Drive our resource kind of source of truth. And so the reason why we're doing that is because now we're able to use Claude MCP to get information on the fly. So can you pull the latest information for client? So here is an example where can you pull the latest information for a client, and we're going to run this, and it's going to connect to Drive, pull the latest files that we have there in our client folder, and then kind of return to me the latest that we have there. So right now, I didn't really specify where to look, but even on its own, it said, okay, we're going to start looking on the internet, but we're also going to look on in your Drive summary. This, I would actually say, is it's pulling information from live sources from the internet, but this is actually not working as I expected it to.
It really starts to make you think that all of the different data sources that you have can now be accessible in one place. And again, it becomes like this super powerful assistant that has access to all of these things, can put them together and do whatever you want with them. Create a report based on this information, help you problem solve or troubleshoot or brainstorm. And it's just like a different way of using software. I feel like one of the things that is going to happen is because of these AI tools, you're going to spend less time in individual applications, and you're going to spend more time with some sort of like central AI system that is going to be navigate those systems for you and do things for you.
Yeah, it's really the central system is going to be what's able to interface on everything on your behalf, right? That's the holy grail is you have an interface with every single data source, data repository that you have, and then just really accelerate your workload. Instead of going to all those disparate places, you're kind of in your cockpit, so to say, right? So for this example, we'll pull the latest information for our client and draft an executive summary for our CEO, right? And I let it know, so to pull this information from Drive, and then let's see what it comes back with, right? So here it's already saying I'm going to search Google Drive for this information, and you can always kind of look at its thinking and what it's doing. And at the end of the day, it will do a pretty good job. So you can see two results. There's an email template and some analysis that we did. It's going to fetch some more files, and we'll see. And it knows to look for files that had recent changes and so updated, and it'll run through and draft that for you, right? Whereas before I would have to open up Google Drive, find those files, and then I would have to synthesize the actual report, right? Here I can have it do that on my behalf, look at the sources that it pulled, open those sources immediately, and then verify on my own. So verification is always faster than the creation. And I think in a business setting, we're not here to be super creative every day on everything that we do. Some of these tasks you just need to get done, right? And you need the work to be done. Actually, save yourself time for those tasks that you need more creative thinking. Here is the full update here that it's going to go through. It sourced multiple project updates, revenue expansion opportunities, our team engagement, risk assessment recommendations, next actions. And if I was to go through this, this would be a pretty, just to quickly spot check it, this is a pretty good outline of our latest here.
I mean, this is super cool. I think you can save so much time doing things like this, which is incredible. One question I have for you is you had mentioned that sometimes you also use this for time tracking because it also has access to your calendar. We don't need to demo it, but just out of curiosity, what kind of questions do you prompt it with to help you figure out your time tracking?
So the types of questions I've asked before are really around how much time have I spent with the client? So we'll go into my calendar, and I can have it actually go into my drive and ask it over the past 3 months, how much time have I dedicated to this client? And I can give it some assumptions, but it will make some assumptions on its own. So it'll look at actual meeting time, and then it'll look at emails drafted and communications and documents and deliverables that have been made. And it'll assume some times on it and be like, okay, you've spent 180 hours on this client over the past 3 months, right? And it'll give you a full breakdown of everything where it saw that. And it's just one of these ways where, that type of the data has always been there, but it's never been accessible in this way where you can just ask a very simple question. How much time have I spent on this? It would have taken me hours and maybe a full week to be able to like determine that. And it did it in 3 or 4 minutes.
That's insane. Like this kind of time tracking was previously reserved for only people who could have an EA that, I mean, this is maybe on a personal setting. Like every executive wants to know how much am I spending on this project or that project. But for sure, in a consulting world, you definitely want to know that on a per client basis. And it almost allows you to be a little bit more sloppy, you know? Maybe if you didn't know that you had this, you'd have to be very accurate, maybe use a spreadsheet, daily log, daily track, use all these other tools. Now you have all of these extra crutches that you could use in order to calculate this kind of stuff. So I think that's pretty awesome.
No, I'd love to get into the conversation of crutches. Maybe next time. I have a good amount of thoughts on that.
No, this is great. So, Alex, this has been super awesome. Thank you for showing us both of these workflows. The newsletter generator was amazing. Super cool to see how you're using MCP in your day-to-day. And the final question that I just want to end on is, I mean, things are moving so quickly. What are you most excited about over the next 12 months? Maybe what's not yet quite possible that you think that might be over the next 12 months?
One of the things that, I'm really excited in the business space is interfacing with legacy systems that don't have APIs, or interfacing with systems that were custom built. And we just see so many clients and businesses where even now we can come up with some creative ways to work their systems. But a year or 2 years ago, if you have a legacy system and you can't interface with it, there's no way to do it. Project's over. Right now, with a lot of kind of advancements with like building MCPs and building even operators, that's something I'm really interested in being able to unlock. Another one is, again, I would say the continued development of coding agents. Super excited in that space, really looking forward to them improving more and more and being able to simplify the building process and iteration process. I've yet to build an application that I have in my head in a one-shot format, right? I'm at like 200, 300 queries before I get to like a beta. So very excited there. And then the general progress of MCPs and the standardization there, and really more and more SaaS products adopting it and really building out very robust ones where you're able to unlock or access data like you never could before.
Lots of good things, and I do believe it. I do think that we're going to get those things. Alex, if people want to reach out and get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, for sure. People can reach out to me directly at alex.lee@gocadre.ai. That's GOCADRE, gocadre.ai. And happy to have a conversation with anyone that comes my way.
That's awesome. Well, Alex, thanks so much for doing this. This was great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aiden. This is fun.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of This New Way. If you like the content, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you can get notified when we post the next episode. See you next time.